Sharon Hodgson is the MP for Washington and Sunderland West and has championed the benefits of a fair, properly funded school meal service for a long time. She currently chairs the all-party parliamentary group on school food and, since April 2021, has served as parliamentary private secretary to Labour Party leader Sir Keir Starmer. She also made the list as one of public sector catering's most influential in 2022 and has agreed to take time from a very busy schedule to talk about some of the issues facing public sector catering. So hello, Sharon, and thank you for your time today.
Hello, David. Yeah, very welcome. Nice to see you again.
Okay, all right, we'll kick off with, from what you know, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing caterers right now in schools, hospitals, care homes?
Right, well, they're sort of similar in lots of ways to what I'm facing, everyone's facing the cost of living crisis. And, what you'll find is the cost of procurement, the cost of products that you're having to buy in and use, and also the cost of your staff, because there's more pressure than ever on staff everyone always wants to be paid well and properly, but because of the pressure on everyone's individual budgets, that's even more sort of come to the fore with the pay pressures. Therefore, the cost of retention, trying to retain your staff across the sectors that have been trained up over many, many years, had all that money spent on them for their training. And the last thing you want is to lose them. But at the end of the day, where in the past they might have had a little bit of sort of flexibility in their, personal budgets that they could have sort of said, chose loyalty over the best paid job. People now are having to sort of go, I'm sorry, I love working here, but I've got to follow the money, even though they mightn't be happy in the job that might just be £1 an hour more or whatever. They're just so desperate for that extra money. So those pressures across the board, and with public sector catering, none of those can be really passed on to the the service user, if you like. That in schools you cannot pass that on. The government are not passing on the increased costs for providing free school meals or the infant free school meal offer. You can't recoup that by charging to the parents who are paying. You've got in hospitals again, you can't be charging patients for their meal across the hospital sector. Same in prisons, same in care homes. With care homes, for the ones who are paying for those places, you might be able to pass on a little bit of the cost, but honestly, I don't know how across the whole public sector caterers, how they're managing to square this circle. I fear that that's going to prove impossible and something's going to give. That is my real concern.
Okay, well, you've laid out very eloquently the problems. What do you think could be done to help?
But I think the government are going to have to seriously take notice and offer and do something to help. Like, for instance, with the one that I'm massively involved in as chair of the all-party group on school food, is they should be recognising the actual cost of providing school food and increase the amount paid per meal for the infant offer and the free school meal offer. They need to do the same across all public sector catering, in the prisons, in the care homes, in the hospitals, and they've got to actually listen to the sector, understand what the pressures are, and do something about it. And they can't just, at the moment it just feels like sticking plaster politics, that whatever, whoever's shouting loudest, whatever the issue is, they'll find, some sort of very small way to try and say, oh, therefore we've addressed that, everything's fine. Because at the end of the day, we need a resilient public sector, food supply chain. And at the moment, from what I hear from when I meet with you guys, it's, getting increasingly, very difficult, if not almost impossible, to do what you need to do.
So the government itself will obviously say that they have, financial constraints that they have to work within. So what is the best way of being able to persuade them that this money is needed in this particular instance for across the public sector?
I think all working together with a united voice, that always, being sort of smart with your campaigning and coming together and collaborating and sort of making sure that there's clear and concise asks, rather than a scattergun approach or sort of a plague on all your houses, or it's all just rubbish. Having sort of clear deliverable, what should be deliverable, but maybe achievable goals that you can sort of hit the government with. Also in the work that Henry Dimbleby, who's a real friend to our sector across all of these sectors, in the National Food Strategy, the government commissioned him to do the National Food Strategy. I just asked a question in the chamber this morning about when they're going to prioritise responding in full. They say the minister said he's responded, but they haven't responded properly, and somehow he reckons that they've started delivering on the recommendations, but that's not what we're hearing from Henry. It's their food strategy, they commissioned it, and now they've got to actually do something about listening, because he engaged with, I'm sure you all engaged with him on the National Food Strategy, and there's some great recommendations in there. So that's one of the things that you could all as a sector be campaigning for, that they listen to their own sort of champion of who did the National Food Strategy, and they implement that. And the other main thing that we all need to see to get more money into the coffers is growth in the economy. Whatever reason you want to give, obviously massive part of that is Brexit, massive part is the pandemic, some of it is also the war in Ukraine, but we've got stagnant growth. We really need to have serious growth in the economy, and then when there's more growth, there's a bigger pie that can then be shared out with everyone. So we really need that. And obviously your sector, it's not, your sector isn't a one where you're selling anything, but it's sort of the public sector catering, the public services are the bedrock of sort of what society sits on, and so we need all of people in hospitals looked after properly, our children looked after properly. The children are the future. It is a cliche, but it is so true. Yeah. The prison population, the people in the care homes, when people take their kids to school, they put their parents in a care home, when you've got friends and family in hospital, you can go about your daily life and your job and be productive in that job if you know confidently that those people, your nearest and dearest in any of those places, are being looked after properly. When you fear that that's not happening, you are not going to be as productive. You are going to be taking days off to actually take food into hospital, or make sure your children are being looked after properly in school. You need to be confident that that's happening in order for you to get on and do your job better. So you can't grow the economy in your sector, but you're the underbelly of sort of propping up everyone to go out and do their day job. So that's another argument that you could sort of use with the government. But yeah, and I'm always there as a friend and ally and advocate to fight on your behalf as well.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us anything about Labour Party thinking on issues like funding of free school meals, possibly what we might see in your next manifesto?
So we are still being quite sort of tight-lipped, because sadly, I know it feels like this government have been in just forever. Well, because it's 13 years. I know they like to pretend, Boris liked to pretend he was all new and shiny. But after the different iterations of Liz Truss and now Rishi, and now it's hit 13 years, we're into the 13th year. We're not having that anymore. This isn't a new shiny government. But there could still be 2 more years, David, before the next general election. So we can't really, fully give out what our manifesto might be. It's not written yet. It's still in formulation. We're a very democratic party, so there is so many layers to formulating policy. Bridget Phillipson is our Shadow Secretary of State, and I know she's very exercised about all these issues, and she has announced already that we'll have universal breakfast clubs, which is part, there's a childcare element to that as well as the food element, which is very important because the childcare system is just broken. So that so far is the main thing around this agenda that we've announced, universal breakfast clubs. Obviously I'm pushing, it shouldn't be an either or. As important as breakfast is, even if the kids had an amazing breakfast, 3 hours later at lunchtime, they are going to be starving. They're little engines, and they burn that fuel really quickly. And for those who get free school meals, who are eligible for free school meals, or the infant on the infant offer, they'll get topped up at lunchtime. But even the child who might be on universal credit in their family isn't eligible. They're in the juniors or above. They're not going to get a free school meal, and they might have an empty lunchbox. Their parents might have sent them in with something, not very adequate. Certainly won't have the money to be paying, the $2.50 or whatever it is to pay for a school meal. And those families, what we're talking about, the cost of living crisis, those families are really, really facing that pressure. And I know all of us in the Labour Party are very exercised about that. It's been looked at. I know it's been looked at. You've got to, you can imagine how strongly I feel about this and how I'm lobbying. And so this issue is so close to my heart. It is being talked about, it's been looked at, but I can't say, I can't say because it hasn't been decided yet what our offer will be. But watch this space and know that I was told the other day that in the run up to 97, Margaret Beckett was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and she was in charge of the purse strings. And there was a few words that she used to preface every single answer to, and she had everyone doing it when they did their media interviews. And it would be like, when you get in, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that? And she would start every sentence with, when resources allow. So I think, that's probably going to be our 3 words that we might have to use in cases like this, when resources allow. And I hope that when resources allow, that we have a really good offer on free school meals. So watch this space.
Okay, probably a very sensible approach, but knowing that an election might still be some way off, I wonder, do you see any sort of cross-party consensus developing on issues like the funding of school meals?
I hope so. I mean, I work cross-party on a lot of these issues, and there is so much consensus. A lot of Conservative members often don't want to sort of show their support too publicly on this, because a lot in their party are not on the same page as a lot of us on these issues, and believe it shouldn't ever be, universal or expanded, a lot of these things. But not all Conservatives think that. So, I do a lot of work on trying to sort of find out who are the like-minded members on all of these issues, on, food security, the national food strategy, breakfasts, school meals, before and after school clubs, stuff like that. And there are some, and we're doing a bit of work on that now, trying to sort of identify and find those key allies. So in time, what you often find is, and we found that over the Marcus Rashford stuff, when he, put his head above the parapet and started talking about this during the pandemic, and he's carried on, he's calling for preschool meals for all on universal credit, as Henry Dimbleby is also, that you would start to find far more friends and people open to issues where in the past they would never have even considered it. And before you know it, something, I know Harriet Harman always talks about her first ever PMQ, and she's mother of the house now, and it was to Margaret Thatcher, and it was about childcare. And Margaret Thatcher sort of looked at her very dismissively and went, I can't believe you're asking the Prime Minister about childcare. What a ridiculous question. Can you imagine that answer now? Childcare is a perfect question to be asking the Prime Minister about, but how times can change. And Harriet is spoken about, it wasn't just people on the government benches who were sort of looking at it as if she'd lost her mind. It was people on our own side who were looking at it going, really, that's what you've asked a question to the Prime Minister on. So the point I'm making is how things that might seem that nobody's, you know, interested in on one side or the other can become very much the sort of topic of the day, and very much something that everyone is in agreement on. And so I'm always optimistic. That's why I'm a politician. I just always believe the world can be made a better place, and that we can play our part in getting there. And this is one of those issues that I'll always believe we can reach a cross-party consensus on it.
Actually, that's a very good cue for the final question, which was really just looking ahead. What grounds do you see for optimism?
So yeah, following on from that is that sort of, we will start to see this as not a political football. The whole of public sector catering, the food security issues that we talk about, that this will just, be a no-brainer, that government will, of any colour, will focus on and make sure it's funded properly, and children are fed properly, and people in our hospitals and care homes and prisons, universities right across the sector are all fed properly, and that there's a secure food chain. And the way to achieve all of that is what we talked about just a moment ago, about the cost of living crisis. And to sort that out, we need growth, and to sort the growth out, we need sort of an economy and relationships with Europe post-Brexit and the rest of the world that work better. And I honestly think the best way to achieve all of that is a Labour government. And you might say, well, she would say that. Well, yes, I would. That's why I'm in politics, and I'm a Labour politician, and I will always believe the country will be better under a Labour government. And you can look back, and it's so sad that in the last 100 years, there's only been two periods of Labour government, two, maybe three, yeah, maybe more, but like sort of the number of years, it would be 75% Conservative years to 25% Labour years. And that breaks my heart, because when you look at what we've achieved under those Labour years, it's the NHS, it's the national minimum wage, it's reform of the House of Lords, it's devolution, it's sort of open university, that the list goes on and on and on and on of good things that we would have to show for our time in office. And I look at where we are now with the NHS on its knees, and this massive cost of living crisis, and the industrial action we're seeing. There was no nurses, doctors, ambulance workers, anything like that went on strike during 13 years of a Labour government. And there might have been, a couple of teacher strikes. I don't know the numbers, but nothing like we're seeing now. So we really are in the dying days of a pretty poor period of Conservative government. And so my answer obviously is, things can only get better, to use that phrase that I think we used once before. But they can, because for heaven's sake, they can't get any worse. If things get any worse than they are now, I don't know how we're going to cope as your sector, but as a country. So we've got to hang on. We're like hanging on by our fingertips now, and see out the next 2 years, and hopefully there'll be a new dawn with a lovely new passionate Labour government with lots of fresh ideas to take forward and sort a lot of this stuff out. So no pressure on Keir, as wonderful as he is, in our shadow cabinet, and who'll be going into government, but I know they are so passionate, so energised, buzzing with ideas of how we're going to sort things out. So we just got to convince the country. It's a democracy, it's up to the voters, but I hope we get given that chance to sort things out.
Sharon Hodgson, thank you very much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.